Welcome to the Cockney Guide to Enlightenment podcast. My name's Steven Rosen, and in this podcast we go beneath the surface of people's lives to find out what makes them tick. My own life I wrote about in this book, Lost in the Babylon. It's through childhood adversity, organised crime and a successful life as a businessman in the city. When I talk to people, we go beneath the surface of where they got to in their lives and we find out what really makes them tick. So if you want to follow me, connect to me with social media at Cockney Prophet. And if you enjoy this podcast, please like it, subscribe or follow us and enjoy the episode. Okay, so I've not been very active lately, but I've been resting and kind of trying to regain my energy, which seemed to just disappear for some reason. I'm not sure what happened to it, but it just went. And sometimes life's like that, isn't it? Sometimes it's like it goes along and it's not always to my alignment, And I think part of the process of learning to live life on life's terms for me has really been about to not try to align life to me, but try to align me to life, if that kind of comes across in the right way. But basically, I've been kind of thinking about what I've been doing here with the podcast, and it's been brilliant, and I'm really enjoying the podcast. I'm really enjoying the conversations that I'm having with people, and kind of looking back over all the conversations I've had so far. They've all been very intuitive conversations. They've all been about how people are getting through their lives and really transmuting their negative experiences. And when I say negative, probably like difficult and painful experiences, and also their rich, warm and beautiful experiences, and how to really honour that stuff and how to incorporate it into life and just move forward with that stuff. So that's really what this podcast is about, because there's so many different distractions, so many different variables that are pulling us in all different directions all the time. And, the reason I wrote this book, my memoir, Lost in the Babylon, was because, I've just got so pulled about by life and my idea of how life should look and what it should be about. And most of my life, to be honest, I was pretty unconscious, from a kid, really. And I understand why I was unconscious, because it was just too difficult to be conscious in my body, in my experience of this life. So I found ways and means to escape. And on some kind of levels, I'm not comparing myself to everybody else in society, but on certain levels that a lot of people would probably identify with, to a greater extent, we're all trying to escape. And there's so much conditioning out there. There's so much thought and motivation that's gone into all these systems of us escaping, and us escaping us on a deep level. And there's some really clever corporations out there. There's some clever people. There's some really astute agendas out there that have really developed ways to keep us all just looking outside for validation, to quantify our worth, on what we've got. What have I got here? I've got this, I've got that. I'm in a lovely little place that, fortunately I've been able to buy, and I've got a nice watch on. I've got this, I've got a shirt on. I've got a car outside. I do a bit of work. All of this stuff, it's all important in some senses of security and validation, but it's also, there's a lot of agendas out there that are engineering our need for this qualification, for this validation of ourselves, and they're finding ways that they can sell us a product or sell us an idea that takes us outside of ourselves. And yeah, so my journey through life has been a lot of it has been outside of myself, to different levels. And obviously anyone who has read my book, if you've read my book, thanks. It's brilliant that you've bought it. And I know a lot of people have got a lot out of it. And it validates, not that I needed to validate it, but when I kind of released that, I let it go and just thought it's going to do its work, whatever that is, let it go, have no expectations. And I didn't really promote it, throw any big money behind it to try and get it out there. So it's just been more of an organic, natural kind of process, which is still ongoing. It's brilliant. I still get messages all the time from people who have just read the book and have been inspired or have been awakened to some extent. But what my work I feel is about at the moment is about understanding the process of being conditioned, being trapped, and that's by societal conditioning, that's by generational conditioning, the stuff that's kind of been passed down to me, and the conditioning I've passed down to my children as well. And by being unconscious, I've passed down stuff that really saddens me to this day. It saddens me that, I come from a very, very dysfunctional, chaotic upbringing. Really, I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but, I come from a place where I was in survival mode from very, very early on, and it was very chaotic. There was, no security really, no security of family, of nurturing, of love, of all the stuff that we feel that maybe, would have been beneficial for us, or I say I feel, would have been beneficial for me as a child. And would that have changed the path that I took? I don't know. I'm not going to try and unpick all of that about what different paths I took. I mean, where I am is where I am, and it's for a good reason. And the reason, I think, is that, to partly share this experience and to partly carry on the journey that I'm on of a deeper recognition of what this life is really all about for me. And, it's really interesting. So getting back to the generational stuff, I grew up in a lot of dysfunction, and I tried to escape that by any means and every means possible to me. And as a young child, most of the means that were possible were limited. So, what I done was I changed my internal system. I changed my character system of how my character traits functioned. And the ones that didn't work for me, which would be like stuff like sensitivity, vulnerability, loving, caring stuff, all of that kind of stuff didn't work for me because I was in a harsh environment in the East End of London, and there was none of that stuff was really on offer from my family to be offered to a child that needed that sort of connection, so there was no connection on that level for me. And probably unconsciously I realised that, that gear wasn't going to work for me. So I kind of bent all that out of shape and created different character traits that served me in the environment that I lived in. And that's fine, you might say, oh, that's survival. Everyone needs to do that, you need to kind of find a way through. And it's true, that did serve me at the time. But what it created was me losing connection with myself. So in my pursuit to be okay, I just got further and further from this connection with myself that inherently I think every one of us has. And that is the connection that the whole of society, out there that's trying to sell you a product or an idea or something, is trying to diminish that connection that you have with yourself. Because the more that you're connected with yourself, the less influenced you're going to be by their efforts to control you, to persuade you, to sell your stuff, really. And and the Western world has been capitalism. A lot of it has been just about this continuously more and more and more, getting more and more, and obviously it's not a really simple subject to just go bang, bang, bang. We can pick this apart very easily. I mean, maybe some people can, I can't. But it's something that, when you get the chance to step back, observe what's going on for yourself, your feelings, your thoughts, and really observe them, and then start looking like, where's this gear coming from? Where's this story coming from? Where's this story that I need a nicer car, a brand new car coming from? Or where's this story that, this new shirt's really important to me. I feel quite, I feel a lot better wearing this new shirt than I did that old T-shirt. And there's validity in that, but also there's dysfunction in that, because, on a deeper level, it's like, I'm not enough, but this shirt will make me enough. It's a very simplified way of doing it, but maybe it's an accessible way of doing it. You can apply it to, whatever you like, whether it's your house, your car, your job, your relationship, whatever. If there's anything out there that you're using to make yourself feel valuable and to make yourself feel content and whole, then I suggest that, there's a connection missing, or the connection that you have with yourself is lacking, and you're trying to replace the lacking part from somewhere else and something else. And obviously, the way that life functions is all these people have got good ideas of like how to make you feel better. It's your health, it's the gym, it's it's a this, it's a that, and certain parts of that are going to make you feel better. For the right reasons. Looking after your health is going to make you feel better for the right reasons. So, it's quite finite that when you get down to the level of being manipulated and being pliable and made pliable, it's quite finite. And a lot of the way that these subliminal messages are sent to us are through fear. Fear's created, and we become fearful that we're not going to have enough, or we're not going to be secure, we're not going to look good, we're not going to feel good, and we buy into it because of fear. So take away the fear, and then you've got a completely different lens to go, okay, well, yeah, a little bit of that's quite good, I'll have that and that and that, but the rest of it is not for me. So, we get the ability to really understand our own process and our own lives, and what's working for us, and more importantly, what's not working. And the stuff that isn't working, I think, is the stuff that we need to start moving out of the way. And I've moved a lot of stuff out of the way. A lot of my processes, a lot of my conditioning, a lot of my functions, and also the stuff that I've used that's been really beneficial. I've also even had to look at that, my drive to succeed. When I come out of drug addiction, I come out of, a life of criminality and living in a completely different reality. I started to work, I learned how to be honest, I learned how to, just face this world, in a different way, and I had a lot of drive and a lot of ambition, and I went out and done very well with that drive and ambition, and created a lot of security, a lot of wealth for my family, all of this kind of stuff that on one level you might look at it and think, well, wow, well done, mate, you're brilliant. But on another level, it cost me. And what it cost me was connection. It cost me connection to myself. It cost me connection to my children and my family. And it kept me still in a dysfunctional way because, you know, I recently had a conversation with my daughter who's grown up now and she's got her own kids. And the conversation was basically, you know, Dad, you know, we had a lovely home. We had nice things in that house and that was lovely, but you wasn't available. You wasn't there. You wasn't present. And that really landed with me, like, you know, I really felt that. And not in a sense of I felt shame about that or I felt guilt about that, because at the level of consciousness that I had, I know I was doing my best then. And, you know, I had big drivers that was trying to, you know, move away from the chaos that I grew up in and put something different on the table for my family. And I did that. So, you know, that was a win, but in that win, I was losing still. And this is why I'm sitting here having this conversation, and this is why I'm putting podcasts out there in the world and having conversations with other people, because, you know, I like to, for my own life for sure, like to be conscious of actually what the cost of certain behaviours, certain paths are, certain, you know, ambitions and goals are. What's the cost of all of that stuff? And the cost to my humanity. And, you know, maybe some people go, well, you know, it's just the price that you pay. That is the price you pay. And for sure, you can look at it like that. And, you know, I walked away from a very successful, on the surface of it, a very successful life. You know, I had a big business. I employed, you know, anywhere 80 to 100 people at any one point, and was cracking on in the property world. You know, I had quite a reasonable property portfolio, you know, on the surface, 26 years in a relationship, marriage, and a beautiful house, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So on the surface, I was ticking all the boxes, but I was living a life that was really still what I'd created and made up, and to a certain level, it wasn't real, and certainly it was without a deeper connection to myself. And the point of all of this, I suppose, is that I'm awake. I'm awake, and I'm really conscious now of how much effort it takes to really be awake, to wake up and really go, wow, man, this is me, this is my life, this is my experience in this skin that I'm having. And the more consciousness that I can maintain in my life, the better my relationships. You know, I was able to have this conversation with my daughter and hear her and see her and go, I'm sorry, you know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that was your experience of growing up. That was the impression you was left with from your childhood, that I wasn't available, I wasn't present. And it's, you know, and without any justification of, you know, why that was, and just being able to really connect on that level with somebody else, with another human being, and be able to feel that, you know, that's their experience of life. I know my own experience. I've felt it. You know, I talk about it. I try to share it. I'm continuously looking at what it's cost me. You know, what it's cost me, and also in that what it's cost me, it's not like, oh shit, what has it cost me? It's like, what it's cost me is it's given me the ability to grow, and it's given me the ability to really have a different experience of this whole thing, and not, you know, not to discredit anything that I've done in my life. You know, it was all got me to this path. It all brought me right here, right now, and it was all valuable lived experience. You know, some of it was horrendous, painful, difficult. Some of it was beautiful, amazing. A lot of it I didn't really fully appreciate one way or the other because I wasn't present. And I mean, if you understand what I'm talking about being present, about being conscious, then you'll understand this conversation that I'm putting out here. But if you don't, please stop, breathe, start going through this process of like questioning what's going on. Because for me, I just had a constant story going in my mind all the time, a narrative. And the narrative was based on what my ego was directing my personality to come up with, basically. My ego was running the whole show, and not as in like the big I am ego. It was the very subtle, like, this is the way that we're going to win. This is the way that we're going to get what we want. And all these very, finite subtleties created the person that I become and the versions of me that I lived. And there was different versions as I went along. And I became comfortable in those versions. I became an expert in those versions of being me or pretending to be me, even to the extent that I fully believed that was me. But there was more. There was stuff that I hadn't accessed, There was vulnerability, there was sensitivity, there was a need to be loved and nurtured and cared for, and all of that kind of stuff that, that was the stuff that, I didn't know how to be with any of that stuff or get that stuff or... so that's the part of me that I was living without. So I was living on the surface, doing my best with what I was equipped with, but still lacking quite a lot. And I wrote this book because I realised that had I not woken up, had I not come to a point that I was aware that I didn't know who I was at 48 years old, very successful, been through prisons and, chaos and all of that kind of stuff, turned that around, got to a really good place in life and then realised, oh, wow, who am I? Who is this person having this experience of life? And I had to go and find out. So that, for me, was my point of really waking up. And, and it was a process. And I didn't just wake up one day suddenly. It was like, I'd been doing this work and this continuous need to connect with myself on a deep level. And I believe that each and every one of us born into this human life has got this need. And it looks like a lot of us are constantly searching outside of ourselves to fulfill that need. And you're never going to do it. Never going to do it. I mean, I've got friends who are wealthy beyond, imagination. And if I'm spending time with those people, I can just see they're constantly going. The brain's constantly whirling. The eyes are constantly elsewhere. And so that tells me, and my experience and observing that tells me that it doesn't matter, what or how much you get. If you haven't got that deep connection with yourself, if you're not nurturing that real truth about, what is this life about, then, you're missing the trick, really. You're going through life not really valuing and not really getting the full quality of what this is about. And it plays out in everywhere. It plays out in relationships. It plays out in everything we do. And how we look at the world, how we view the world, how we treat the world, how we treat nature, how we consume, how we, just want more and more and more. And, let's forget about the consequences. Let's make some sort of deal with ourselves or with someone else about the consequences. Let's offset our carbon or, whatever these schemes that people come up with corporations normally come up with trying to make a profit out of something somewhere at the cost of what it's doing to us. And you know, you can look at this on an individual basis, you can look at it on a corporation basis, on a country basis. That principle acts out all the way through. And in Western society anyway, I've never really lived in an Eastern society, so I can't really talk too much about that. I've kind of taken a lot from that side of the world, and a lot of the stuff that I practice really has those principles that people live differently by involved in it. And I'm going to hopefully, you know, be a bit more precise about this sort of stuff and start putting out a few more of these kind of little videos, and I'm going to be looking at, you know, parts of the book and parts of the personas that I created and lived within this book, and kind of unpacking them really and explaining them a bit more concise in a bit more detail. So hopefully, you know, it's a bit more accessible or more accessible. And yeah, so that's the kind of work that I'm engaged in. I'm actually writing a second book as well, which is this deeper level stuff. You know, it's about access and awakening really, and what is enlightenment. You know, what does that mean? How do we get there? How do we become disentangled from all of this conditioning from life, from generations, from society, from ourselves? You know, all the stuff, all the sacrifices and compromises we've made, the coping mechanisms we've put in place because, you know, a situation might have been too difficult to cope with, so we've created a way to cope with it that might have worked for, you know, in the short term, but does it work in the long term? Are we still carrying all of that stuff through life with us? And what's the cost of carrying that stuff through life? So, you know, it's about just personal freedom. And I think from personal freedom and becoming conscious of what's going on a deeper level for ourselves, you know, that gives us a better access to the world. And I think that's work that's worth doing. So, you know, stay tuned, and yeah, just let me know. You know, come back to me. Let me know. Does this resonate? Is it a load of bollocks? Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be both to lots of different people. But anyway, it feels like what's important for me to be doing at this point in my life. And as I say, I've done the going out and creating wealth. I've done all of that kind of stuff. I've done the illusion of, you know, making a secure family. And then when I look back, you know, and talk to the generation underneath me, my children, I find that, oh, actually, it wasn't quite as I thought it was, you know. What I was trying to achieve, I partly achieved, but there was a lot that I didn't achieve. And, you know, I'm still here, so I can still have these conversations today. I can still, okay, you know, that hurts, it's painful, but it's real. And, you know, I'm not beating myself up with this stuff. I'm just saying, okay, this is valuable lived experience. Let's talk about it. Let's share it. Let's honour it. Let's try and give something to the generation, the next generation, that is of more value to them, that is more tangible to them. And yeah, this is what we've all got the opportunity to do. So yeah, my name's Steven Rosen, and my podcast is the Cockney Guide to Enlightenment, and I'm going to be having some good conversations with some really interesting people about life and about what makes them tick, and how we overcome our adversities, and how we realise what is really important to us in life, and what's the method and the mechanism of achieving that stuff and realising it. So stay tuned. Cockney Guide to Enlightenment.